And the constitution of Ukraine makes it impossible to give up territory or trade land. Since the territorial issue is so important, it should be discussed only by the leaders of Ukraine and Russia at the trilateral Ukraine, United States, Russia. So far, Russia gives no sign that trilateral will happen, and if Russia refuses, then new sanctions must follow.
That was Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in the hours leading up to his meeting at the White House today with President Trump. Let's get to CNN's chief data analyst, Harry Enten. Harry, let's talk about Ukrainian attitudes toward the war and really toward ending the war, because there's been some pretty major shifts here.
There have been some absolutely major shifts. The idea that Ukraine's going to achieve complete victory, that idea has collapsed within Ukrainian society. What are we talking about here? Ukrainians on the war versus Russia. You go back to 2022, the start of the war. Fight until Ukraine wins. Look at this. The vast majority, about 3/4, 73% agreed with that position. Negotiate to end the war as soon as possible, only 22%. Look at where we are now. It's a complete flip. It's the inverse. Now 69% want to negotiate to end the war as soon as possible, compared to just 24% who want to fight until Ukraine wins. That's a 49-point drop in this position. Now, of course, negotiating to end the war as soon as possible, that's a bit more nuanced, right? Ukrainians don't want to agree to all of Russia's demand, but I think the idea of even there being some territory that would be not formally recognized as being given that Russia could in fact stay in, that does have majority support, but the idea of formal recognition of Russia's demands, absolutely not.
All right, why do you think that opinion has changed to the extent that it has?
Well, I think one of the big reasons why opinions have changed is this idea that this war is going to end anytime soon. Ukrainians don't think it will. Take a look here. Ukrainians on the war ending within a year. Just 25% say that it is likely. Look at this. 68%. 68% say it is unlikely that the war will, in fact, end in a year. And you'll notice, John, this 68% looks a heck of a lot like the 69% who say that they want to negotiate to end the war as soon as possible.
So President Trump overnight ruled out Ukraine joining NATO, seemingly ever. But what do Ukrainians feel about that?
Yeah, you know, obviously Ukrainians would like to join NATO. That has been a goal of theirs for a number of years. But the idea that that NATO admission will happen within 10 years, look at the collapse in this position. 2022, it was 64%. Now it is just half that level at 32%. So again, this is one of the goals that, Ukrainians had since the beginning of the war. They no longer believe that it's achievable. Well, the idea that Russia is going to be forced out of all of that land that they're occupying, they don't necessarily believe that that is going to happen. So again, I think this is one of the reasons why Ukrainians, they certainly don't want to accede to every Russian position, certainly not most of them, but the idea that they do want to negotiate and end to this war as soon as possible, that has now gone through the roof. Again, we're talking about 69%, which is such a big difference from where we were at the beginning of the war when it was just 22.
Wanting to negotiate doesn't mean wanting to surrender.
Correct.
It means wanting to discuss, and not believing that they'll join NATO is different than wanting to join NATO.
You got it.
But you can very much see how Ukrainian thinking has changed over the last few years.
Absolutely, John.
Harry Enten, thank you.
Thank you.
Kate?
And joining us right now to talk about the state of where things are with this is the former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, William Taylor. He's also a distinguished fellow at the Atlantic Council. It's good to see you again, Ambassador. Let's talk about what could occur today and how significant it really is, the stakes at hand. Zelensky sitting down with President Trump again in the Oval Office, and this time he's bringing friends along with him. Several European leaders coming with him. What do you expect to come from these meetings?
Well, Kate, President Zelensky has some experience with negotiations with the Americans. You will remember you reported that the minerals deal that the Americans put on the table and demanded a signature from President Zelensky, and President Zelensky looked at the proposal, said no, said that we'll get back to you, made a counter proposal. Okay, that could happen today. They could look, the Ukrainians, President Zelensky, could look at the proposal that you just described, that John just described, and say, actually, we can't agree with that, but there are things we might be able to agree to along these lines. And I imagine President Zelensky will be talking with his European colleagues and with other Ukrainians before giving a response to President Trump.
So, Ambassador, when you see the President Trump tweeting that Zelensky could end this war almost immediately if he wanted to, saying no Crimea and never, we would assume, going into NATO. You see that maybe as the opening bid that would be the source of where they begin the discussion today.
Exactly, Kate, exactly. On Crimea, again, as John just pulled out there, there's a difference between formal recognition of Russian ownership, sovereignty over Crimea, which the Ukrainians won't agree to. But they could make a counterproposal. They could, on that one, on the Crimea, they could say, look, we will acknowledge that you Russians now occupy Crimea. We don't like it, we don't accept it, but we acknowledge it. And we will not try to take it back militarily. The Ukrainians could say that. That could be a reasonable counterproposal. On NATO, they could say, okay, we agree that we're not going to go into NATO today, not now, but we won't agree that we can never go in.
And interestingly enough, we just had the former Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko on, and he said that nothing short of NATO membership can offer this, that can actually prevent or would prevent Putin from reigniting another war at some point. But in the short term, the way he described it as a Finnish-style security agreement with NATO could be sufficient. Do you think so?
I think this coalition of the willing that the Europeans are talking about, the British and the French talking about a coalition of the willing that would be apparently willing to put troops, military troops, on the ground in Ukraine to defend Ukraine. And if Russia tried to invade again and deter Russia from trying to do that, I think that could be a fallback from NATO membership. I think President Poroshenko is right. The best is NATO membership, and they shouldn't give up hope for that or expectation for that over time. But as a fallback, the coalition of the willing, something like the Finnish model or related could work.
So interesting. On Trump's post on social media overnight, a top Russian negotiator actually reshared the post, adding this take. I'll read it to you. His take on Trump's conditions for Ukraine, which is Trump and his team are pushing for the real solution. Let problem solving and peace prevail during the big day. That's one of the lead top Russian negotiators in all of this, saying that Trump's right in what he's pushing. But here's my question on this. Have you seen any indication of any retreat from Vladimir Putin on any position that he has held now for years in order to get to peace?
None, zero. He has given up nothing. And President Trump needs to ask the question about his top priority. President Trump has said over and over he wants to stop the killing. That means a ceasefire. That means a ceasefire now while they negotiate, while these issues are debated. Ceasefire now will stop the killing, which is what President Trump has said all along.
Ambassador, I really look forward to having you on once we hear what comes out of these meetings and what counterproposals then will be coming. It's great to see you.